focus mostly on just getting support for your application for the historic tax credits, and that things can still change as you get the community feedback later. So
yes.
But with that, I'll let you take it away. Introduce yourself, Will Lieberman, everyone.
All right. Thank you all for your time and letting us present this today. So this is our historic tax credit application overview that I'm going to discuss. It's historic tax credits are something I've used for the last, I don't know, 18 years. And this, I generally use a state, and sometimes selectively I'll use a federal. This project will require both state and federal. And the idea is just taking a step back. I'd probably say, I'm William Lieberman. We've owned the building for a number of years. For the building, initially, we really wanted to do K through 12 education, but there's a 100-year deed restriction that hasn't been lifted by St. Louis Public Schools. And the building really lends itself. It's the most efficient school I've ever seen, the way it's designed, but it's not been approved. And there have been very high qualified users that we've pursued moving forward with the St. Louis Public School, and rightfully, wrongfully, whatever, it's off the table. It's not a. So the second highest use is residential. And we believe we can get somewhere around 60, I think it's 66 units, 36,000 gross square feet. There's a lot of common areas in these schools. And there's also, as Jake's speaking about this, there's that big, what we would like to do is screen this property with single family homes on the Bartmer side for the most part. And we spoke with some people at the city and the planning department and architectural department where you get your permit. And he brought up the idea of doing connected townhomes, but they would be fee simple and they'd be singular ownership. So that's a whole different conversation, but since it was brought up, that is still part of our idea. We're acknowledging that in our application to the State Department of Economic Development and State SHPO office, which is a State Historic Preservation Office. This project would require both state and federal tax credits. You have to get state for it to be economical to do the project, and the state is a very competitive process, and there's a finite number of dollars available. It would be market rate at this juncture. If we got the state and federal, we believe that it's possible to get this done with market rate units. So that is what we're pursuing at this juncture. And the building lends itself well. Christina Claggett from Homegrown Studios is our state historic tax credit consultant who got the building on the National Register, got it across that finish line. The process was started by the Landmarks Association of St. Louis, Andrew Weil, and some of his colleagues in the historic sphere. And Christina got it across the finish line, and that's been a 4 or 5 year process to get that done because it's a mid-century building and it wasn't part of the original mid-century survey of buildings that contributed, but it was designed by Gio Obata of HOK. It was one of the first projects he worked on in his starting of that firm. And it's a really interesting building. I think some of these 3D renderings that we have kind of show what it could look like under different light, different different landscape, and some improvements. So that's kind of where we are. This is a process that generally I don't go to a development association. If I were to do this in Benton Park West, I just apply for the credits. But I think since there's so much interest in this project and the property by our neighbors, I think it services the community and our interest to get some approval from this development review committee and I guess the combined brain trust that exists here that knows that this building likely nothing will happen here without historic tax credits. And it's something that allows us to do what the community has kind of addressed. There was a lot of concern with the senior housing based on the fact that it was under the umbrella of the low income housing tax credit. If we were to do market rate, it would not be limited to seniors, most likely, unless there was some reason to go down that road. We would likely be market rate, and we'd be competing against the Everly on Delmar and other high quality developments. And that's the direction I generally like to be in, and that we would pursue with this project.
Thank you, Will. I'm not sure if you're able to see, there's a question in the chat from
I
Dr.
can go there.
Can you see that?
What
I
other
can-
similar projects have you completed, where and when? I have never done a school building. I've done combined, this is a 76,000 square foot building. We manage or own about a little less than 1 million square feet across our portfolio. And we've renovated over 100 units in the city of St. Louis since our inception. I would say that on one block on Cherokee, we've done about 60,000 square feet of space from we're in Cherokee in Iowa to Cherokee in Ohio. There's a concert venue, a microbrewery, about 8 apartments and a number of storefronts and some large commercial spaces. So we've done lots of residential. I would say 2/3 of our tenant relationships are residential tenants that we've renovated. And we've been doing it for 20 years.
Great. Who else has questions for Will, either about the building or about the tax credits or the process?
This is
Well-
Nathan. I have a question about the process. Can you give us some general timeline of when things would be filed and kind of what, what's the timing for review and a decision and those sorts of things?
So the application for the historic tax credits the application period is the month of July. And it occurs twice a year. I don't know when they give you the decision. I would imagine it's within 3 to 6 months. And once you get the approval for that, then you find a syndicator that buys or invests in the credits. And we would finish up our construction plans and pro forma. And if we were awarded the credits, we'd probably have shovels in the ground within the next year. If we're not awarded the credits, we would apply again. This is an interesting situation. So I think the state of Missouri has about $100 million available in historic tax credits, maybe 110. I don't remember the exact amount. No, it might be 90 million. But in certain census tracts, which this qualifies, there's a $10 million amount that's available for a census tract that has lower income thresholds. So individuals in, let's say, Tower Grove South would not qualify for that $10 million bucket of money. So we're a little more optimistic about our ability to get this. But I don't, it depends on the merits of the project and the amount of job creation sometimes and other factors. And with residential, there's not a lot of job creation, but it's a residential neighborhood. So the intensity of use for this is appropriate for our neighbors to do something that would be, you can't do anything industrial with it. So the number of full-time jobs would be a small number compared to, let's say, if somebody was to renovate a building and turn it into offices. So we're competing against that type of an environment. So I can't tell you when it'll happen, but we would be in a position to move forward if we're awarded these within a year.
Okay, thank you. One follow-up question. You mentioned that there's a state element and a federal element to that. to the process? Do they run kind of concurrent with one another, or do you have to do the state first and then the federal?
Well, the federal, we could get the federal without the state, but it's not enough of an incentive to be able to do this development. So we require the state in order to do the project. The federal is a 20% credit. The state is a 25% credit. They monetize out, the state monetizes it like 90 cents on the dollar on qualified rehabilitation expenditures, which there are some things that aren't included in that. And then the federal is 20 cents on the dollar, 20% credit that cannot be sold. So you have to enter into a partnership with a tax credit syndicator that is just there for financial reasons. And it's a 5-year partnership that exists. And there's a year leading up to it and a year after about. So it's a total of almost a 7-year partnership. And they get some of the revenue and they get some of the expenses and they generally get all of the tax credit benefit. I don't know if that's more information than you wanted or not.
Well, it's helpful information, but I'm not sure it was actually responsive to my question, and maybe my question wasn't that clear. I was just asking about the process. You talked about July being the month to apply, and then you expect a decision within a few months, maybe that sort of thing. And so I was just asking if the process for applying for the state credits and the process for applying for the federal credits, do they run together, or do you have to apply for one before the other and wait to see if you get one and then apply for the second?
Generally, you apply for the state, and the state historic preservation office passes on the information to the National Park Service historic preservation function. So you start with the state and you end up with the federal if you pursue that.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Will?
Yeah, Guy.
Let's see. You're not, are you applying for the federal? I'm sorry, I think you already said this, but are you applying for the federal?
We will
Okay.
be, yes.
Oh, you will be. Okay, so these will be for rent. The market rate for rent is what you plan for.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're talking about the school right now and the adjacent parking required to support the school building with the apartments that would be there.
All right. Thanks, Jay. Thanks, Will.
You're welcome.
Will, what are there any limitations in terms of what you can do to the building, interior and exterior, as sort of a leading question, with the historic tax credits that you could maybe describe a little bit?
Yeah, so there are a number of things, and you're probably familiar with some, and it depends on kind of the temperature of the state reviewer and sometimes the federal reviewer. If there's if you can sometimes go to the federal reviewer to get approval for things that the state might not be approving. But the hallways, the primary rooms generally have to be unadulterated. The windows, the fenestration, the windows, those things. This project lends itself a little more. While 1964 is a long time ago, maybe before most of us were born on this call, it's still relatively modern compared to 120-year-old structure in the city where you have a requirement for wood windows or different types of dormers and other things that exist. This building does lend itself pretty well to how we function today as a society. We like light, we like the windows to come through. So if you look at these apartments, the biggest limitation of these units is the amount of natural light. So you want it to bleed throughout the unit. And that can be done through things like windows inside of a bedroom, just a clear window that the light comes through. But I don't want to, I think I'm digressing from your actual question. So the front of the building would have to, if we were to put, let's say, we wanted to make patios or terraces on the north facing side, we might be able to do that, and we're going to pursue that. But on the front of the building, we can't have handrails there because that wasn't there originally. maybe they'll let us, but most likely they won't. The primary facade facing Horton needs to look very, it has to have the same openings and other attributes like that. Fortunately, once again, each of these units, each of these classrooms had air handlers. So you can put an air conditioner in that elevation because there's screening or grading on the front. So, I mean, it's so much easier than the brain damage that I've gone through, and maybe some other people on this call have gone through in renovating a historic structure, because it's so modern and it's so similar to how we live today. Does that make any sense? Did I answer your question, Jake?
Yeah. Yep. No, that's great. I think that's helpful. Oftentimes people think historic or tax credits, and then they don't realize that, that there's usually, if you're getting money from the government, there's usually strings attached. So in this case, it's keeping the structure in its mostly historic condition that it's in currently. Who else has questions for Will? Or concerns? Not hearing
I have
much.
a quick question.
I just
I have
sent,
a
I just sent a message there with a question. This is Cynthia.
Okay, I thought I may have I thought I may have missed it. Okay, okay, so I'll read it aloud, Cynthia. So just for clarity, this is directed to Will. Just for clarity, you're applying for tax credits based on your new proposal. If that is the case, and the neighbors are impacted by this venue want to see all new, if that's the case, all neighbors impacted by this venue would want to see all new family homes. And then there's a question, what is your next step? Sorry, Cynthia, I didn't read it aloud. And if there's any clarification, please do add.
No, that's basically the question. Because right now, as I see this and I understand this, we're still talking about the first phase of this process is apartments. And that's a lot of apartments with people on top of people inside this building. It still does not bring single family homes as the first part of this process. We're still talking about apartments being in this building. So I'm curious, after this meeting, he's already applied for tax credits. I just need clarity, a little bit more clarity. I'm not an expert in this, so I don't propose to be. So I may sound like some kid here asking this question, but are those tax credits based on your new proposal?
So the tax credits are specific for the school building, and you can't get tax credits, historic tax credits, on something that's not built. There are other things that we'll be pursuing for that through the St. Louis CDA, and I can speak to that. We're acknowledging the site plan of having homes facing Bartmer and homes or townhomes facing Hamilton in our application for historic credits. But that's not what we're here to discuss today. That is something we will be pursuing because it makes sense for us. We build houses. My partner Adam and I have built 3 houses in Benton Park West, close adjacent to where I do a lot of our developing on Cherokee, and he's built 50 or so homes throughout the city. So we will be pursuing a subdivision and a change to the lot lines in order to accommodate what I just described of building the houses on Horton. I'm sorry, on Bartmer and Hamilton. But I guess maybe it's a chicken or egg thing. I don't think that we would be very successful in selling homes that are of high quality and a relatively high cost if there's a vacant school there. So the conventional wisdom of all the people we've advised with is to address the school and come up with a plan for the school that makes for an improvement to the community that allows people to want to live next to it. But I think that's a really good question that you've asked, is in this process, we have to start with this.
Thank you.
Great. Will, any last comments before we'll let you go, and then we'll discuss internally?
Yeah, I don't. It's a really neat building. It's got an interesting. It's interesting to me because it's all concrete construction on the inside, and I really think it lends itself to being something like, if you've ever been to the Pulitzer Museum or the Contemporary Art Museum in St. Louis, or the some parts of the Guggenheim, where there's just large amounts of gray concrete that looks sleek and modern, and removing the ceiling tiles and removing the tile off the floors and having, sheer nice countertops in the kitchen and laundry rooms in each of the apartment, laundry in the facilities in each of the apartments, and having a high quality development to introduce people to the neighborhood. And then have what we've done on Cherokee is a lot of my renters have become homeowners and viable, strong neighbors. And that's the model we have here, and we can serve so many people. And I would say that this development is not similar to anything that's been done in the neighborhood. It's more similar to new construction, while the facade of what you see on De Bolivar, there's those two new developments. I would say that this is a peer to that versus anything else that I've seen in the neighborhood. And I'm excited about moving in that direction.
Great. Well, thank you very much for taking some time out of your evening to visit with us, and I'll let you be in touch with you shortly.
Great. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you.
All right. Monique, are you still there?